Mazel tov,
A
mazel tov,
very
mazel
good
tov.
morning.
Mazel tov. L'chaim,
Mazel
chaim.
tov.
Hey guys, politics off the platform. Toida.
No politics, Rabbi. No politics. Just a l'chaim.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, Pedig Beis, Halacha Gimel. We're going to be learning today Daf Tezvav. We left off on Daf Yud Dalid Amid Beis. We're going to go back just a couple of words, and we're going to start on the fourth line before the bottom of the Amid, Have Loishanya, and it's going to be a relatively easy daf because it's going to revolve around one nekuda. So for that, we have to go back. Number one, Aleph. We have a brayso, as we quoted from Bavli Bava Kama Daf Pei Amud Aleph all the way in the bottom, and other places, that when Yehoshua conquered the land of Israel, our land, and he divided it to the 12 Shvatim, he made 10 stipulations. A stipulation, Pashat, that if we would not have agreed, then we will not be the halachic recipients of that which he gave us. We learned about one of the 10 Tanoim, and that is that if a person who has a field that has grasses growing in it that meet two criteria. Number one, the person did not plant it. Number two, those grasses are very, very invaluable. They are only good for animals. They're Michael Behema. No, like we said yesterday, if a person plants Le Michael Behema, for him it's valuable. We're not talking about that. We're talking about grasses that grew on their own, compounded with the fact that that which grew, the sfichim of grasses, are only good for animals, not for people, that they automatically become, so to say, hefker, and everyone has the right to take any one of those grasses. That is, we're not even going to repeat that. However, says the Braisa that we learned yesterday, that there is an exception to this Tanai. And the exception is that grasses that are growing in a tilson field, and we're going to translate again, tilson as Fenugreek, and maybe you have a picture, Kevin, that will be helpful, but we're just going to say the word tilson. What we will appreciate today is that tilson was primarily used for animal feed. This line is important to chop, something we're going to learn somewhere in today's daf. Some people used it for consumption, for human consumption. But in principle, tilson be'ikid is l'maychel behemah. But let's go back to what we learned yesterday. It says the Braisa that grasses that grow in a tilson field may not be taken. It was not included in the Tanai. And the reason for that is because the grasses are beneficial. Owners were not mafked. It's not like stam your grass in any other field. And before we elaborate, the problem is obvious, is that blatantly contradicts the rule that we had towards the end of Halacha Gimel. The Mishnah here says that v'chein, I'm just quoting the words of the Mishnah, v'chein tilson shehe'elos minei asavim, that if grass grew on their own in a tilson field, the big chiddush ein b'chayvin l'nakesh. Or as we again quoted yesterday, when the Bavli in Bava Kama Daf Pei Aleph Amud Aleph quotes this Mishnah, the Girsa, the Bavli of our Mishnah is ein b'chayvin la'aker. And we spoke out to Rashi Tosfos that we don't need to repeat. Whichever one, regardless, there is no obligation, certainly not to immediately uproot those grasses. Problem is, we're learning about dinim of kalayim, and the explanation is because grass in a tilson field, ubeloshin chazal sha'asavim koshin letilson, it's detrimental. Mamish doesn't fit. No, we exclude grass in the tilson field from the Tanai Yehoshua because grasses are beneficial. Here we're learning grasses are detrimental. So which one is it? And the way we will learn our Gemara will be that there was a machloikas, even though we didn't word it that way yesterday, and many don't learn it that way, many do. First is Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, and we'll see clearly that this opinion will be brought back today, but not in his name. So we're going to word it that we learned the machloikas. The simpler approach was like this. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha says that when the Braisa, when Yehoshua excluded grass in Tilson from the Tanai, that is when the intent of the owner who planted the grass, Kishazaran La'amir, which means that the owner wants to eat the stalks, or that the owner was speaking about the Tilson, or he wants to feed the stalks to behemoths. It's really Michael Behemoth. And as we explained, and if people saw the picture, they'll appreciate this. The Tilson is a weak stalk. That means that it's unable on its own to properly really grow upright. And if you have any types of grasses on its sides, somehow it's mechazik the stalk, and the stalk therefore becomes bigger. No one debates this. Now that would fit. So therefore, since grasses in a tilson that was planted la'amir, right, for its bundles, that means for its stalks, it's beneficial. That's why it's excluded from the Tanai Yehoshua. But here goes the kicker. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha says that in contrast, our Mishnah, when the Mishnah says that tilson shehe'elos minei asavim ein mechayvin lenakesh, it's only speaking about a tilson field that was planted for its seed. Then once you planted it in order to harvest, to have more seeds to buy to replant. Or maybe there was another function of the seeds that I don't know. But the seeds certainly lose when you have grasses growing near the tilson plant, because any weed or any grass, they need nourishment. So it sucks the sap or the nourishment that otherwise would have gone for the seed. Bottom line is, it's detrimental, and that will explain why ein mechayven lenakish. Now let me say it like this. This latter statement will not be debated. Will not be debated. Even though sometimes, we'll just leave it at that. The problem, I'm just repeating what we learned yesterday. The challenge that Rabbi Yossi has with Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha is that Yaakov Bar Acha made a chiddush that the Braisa that speaks about the exclusion mitnai Yehoshua is only b'shezara la'amir. So the way the Gemara worded it, it's going to come out that let's now introduce in the scenario, in the focus of Tanai Yehoshua, whether it's Gezela, whether it's not Gezela, let's introduce the Isur of Kalayim. If Yehoshua was only speaking of Bishazara La'amid, that means you planted it La'amid. In such a case, when you plant the tilson for their bundles, grasses that are beneficial actually will create Kalayim. In other words, he excluded when a sin is happening, whether the owner planted the grasses, irrelevant. I'm saying, Stam, even if it happened on its own, but you know about it and you're leaving it. According to what we learned, our Mishnah is allowing you to leave it is not b'shazar la'am. So when the grasses grew on their own and you're leaving them in the field, you're being mekayim kilei zerayim, you're violating an issa. You're doing an avena. Yeshua's exception. Oh, for the sinners, let them keep their grass. It says Rabbi Yossi doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense that Yeshua who made a Tanai Bachlal, you can always take grass. But then he made an effort to say, oh, but grasses that grow in the tilson, that you have to leave for the owner. If that exception is only with Bishazara La'amir, it comes out that he made an effort, La'ovrei Averam, doesn't make sense. And therefore, that's where we left off yesterday. And we're gonna read it inside. So what Rabbi Yossi is going to say is, he agrees with Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. This is a mitzias, that when our Mishnah says that Tilson Shehelos Mini Asavim Ein Mechayvin Lanakesh, and Achanami, it must be our Mishnah. When is there no Kalayim? When the person who planted the Tilson planted it for its seed, and therefore it's detrimental. That we're going to leave. But he's going to argue with Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha, Rabbi Yossi. He's going to say that the exception of Yeshua was regardless. Now, regardless will also mean he also made it Oivdei Aveda, but it removes the problem. It removes the problem. Now, we're not done with that yet. We left the middle of that. But this Nakuda, the way we're learning it, that there is a machlekes between Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha and Rabbi Yossi. Let me just finish, Kevin.
Sorry.
Whether the exception, we're only going to focus on the exception of Takanas Yeshua, is only in a tilson, Bishazaro La'amir, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. or Rabbi Yossi, that the exception of Yeshua is for any tilsum field. That is something that we're going to go back and forth in the whole daf today. And just let me finish over here. Let me just say another din over here. And that is the following, that when a person, there's a Tosefta that we're going to quote, I think twice in today's daf, certainly in the beginning, that when a person has a vineyard and in it another grain is growing on its own, that means that it's creating kilei hakedem. There is a din that anyone has the right to uproot it and to take it. Why? Because the presumption is the owner doesn't want it there. He's de facto being mafkeded without even knowing, because if he'll leave that growth in his field, it's going to be makadosh the vines. It's going to make it prohibited. And that's a very big cloud that you should remember, and we're going to use it in our discussion. Another thing that will come from today's daf, that Yeshua's basic Tanai, not the exception that we're learning about today. The basic Tanai is only for grass. It's not only that it's Michael Behema, and it's not only that you didn't plant it. It's also because grass has very little value. There is where Yeshua says that, everyone has the right to take it. Any other type of sphere, any other type of growth that you did not plant, if it's not grass, again, I'm not a farmer. Many other types of herbs or leaves or what have you, not Asev, that is not included in the Tanai, and anyone who takes it will be violating Gezel. And finally, we're going to have, again, this is the type of Agadata that you have in Yerushalmi as a klal. It's simply a halachic story where someone bought a garden already filled with planted vegetables that were mingled together in the Holy Land from a goy. The goy is not bound by kilei zeroim. The Jew that bought it, he wants to use the vegetables. And by the way, when he bought it, the vegetables were fine. Question is, he asked Rabbi Yechanan whether he's chayiv to immediately remove all the vegetables from the ground, which would be, as the rule is, if it's in my Jewish garden, or since he did not plant it, he did not do any isur. And we're going to learn that Asherilio, that the market was like in 2 weeks. If you would leave it in the ground, it would remain fresher, it would grow bigger, it would have more value. If you would be obliged to remove it right now, it would be a loss. So he wanted to know whether he's chayiv to remove it or not, and we'll just leave that vaguely, and that will be the end of all it. Will be, we're going to try to back up Rabbi Yossi, and we won't be fully successful, but we remain with this machlokes again between Rabbi Yaakov Baracha and Rabbi Yossi. Yes, Kevin, quickly ask your question, and then we're going to go hit.
Right. Grass is any seed-bearing plant, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying, is it weed? Because anything that grows has some grass initially. I don't get that.
That grass, a grass that has no seed in it, a grass that has that is only Lamichael Behema, which is exactly what the grass in my front yard is. In LA, I have grass in my backyard. It's plastic. It's all fake. It doesn't grow. It's very expensive. But the God's grass, that was a lot cheaper. What is it good for? Garnish. It's good for that my kids' shoes shouldn't get muddy when it's the rainy season. I'm saying it's L'maichel Behema. That's what cows do. They eat grass. Okay.
Well, in this case, where it's the question whether he's doing it for seeds or doing it for the plant.
Yes.
Is it unique to the fenugreek?
Not unique, but it's not in all products that way.
And how would they know, the person who's looking, when it's for seeds? You see the seeds growing? I should understand.
So that's very important. Even though there's so much of Matasayim involved in Kalayim, so much, David Homami is making a good point that the differentiation that everyone is making in our Mishnah is not something that people will be aware of.
Yeah.
Because who knows why you planted it? You don't know. And
you see the plant.
Very good point. Okay. So coming back. So Rabbi Yossi, this is where I've got 4 lines, Daf Yud Daled Joey. Daf Yud Daled, Amid Beis, in middle of the line, 4 lines from the bottom of the Amid. After Rabbi Yossi tells Rabbi Yaakov Baracha that I categorically reject the notion that Yeshua's exception means he made an effort to teach a din only b'shezara la'amir, which would mean that he made an exception for someone who's behaving sinfully. Doesn't make sense, and therefore he disagrees. Havei loishanya, there is no difference. In the Mishnah, there is a difference. Our Mishnah only fits when you planted it for the seed. If not, The Mishnah would not allow you to leave it there. You would be chayiv la'akish. But Yeshua, he shezara l'zera, he shezara la'omer. Regardless, Yeshua said that grass that grows in a tilson field has to be left there. Now, why would he say that? I'll tell you why. Like plug, since sometimes the grasses that are growing there is allowed to be there sometimes, so he can address it. But then he made a sweep law. No one can remove it. The Gemara is not happy with that. Why? Let's go back to our Mishnah. We learned in our Mishnah. We just quoted this. Now, Yeshua's takana is predicated on what, guys? What's Yeshua's takana predicated on? I take back my loy plug. It's predicated on that grasses are beneficial. If Yeshua's takana was for all the cases, if Yeshua's exception to his Tanai is on all the cases, why would he make an exception? Because it's always beneficial. Again, you see from our Mishnah that it's not beneficial. Because if it would be beneficial to the owner, then Yechai Voisel Lanakesh. Doesn't fit. So Rabbi Yossi says a Gavaldic answer. Now we have two versions of this answer. Actually, Rabbi Yossi didn't give it here in our version. The first version is that Rab Acha b'Shem Rab Miyosha gives an answer. It's amazing how the Gemara was misaded it. There's going to be one nuance, another nuance. They'll both be the same vis-a-vis our question. Let me just word it out. And that is Anaya Maisen. Even in a case where you planted the field for seed, and therefore the grasses are detrimental, the owner doesn't want for the grasses to be growing in the field. But when a person uprooted the grasses, the owner wants to keep the grass. Now you're going to jump and ask, if that's the case, that's to every single grass. The owner wants to keep the grass. So listen to these words, guys. When it comes to all other fields, whose product is primarily Lamaichel Adam, grass is Lebehema. I'm speaking something practical. When people harvest the field, Lamaichel Adam, they will not bother themselves, they will not trouble themselves to gather already uprooted grasses that are there, because like apples and oranges, even though there is some value, but grasses have very little value. Masha Enke, in a Tilson field, since the primary function of Tilson is Lamaichel Behema, listen to these words. So when you gather food, Lamaichel Behema, if on the side you already have uprooted grasses that are good, Lamaichel Behema, you will make the effort to gather it and to schlep it to wherever it is you're taking your storage, Lamaichel Behema, to your barn. Let's read inside the words. Rab Acha b'Shem Rab Miyosha says, Roitze who different gersois bohen, the owner does want it, even when you planted it for seed, even though you don't want the grass in the ground. Why? You know when you want it. In other words, you don't want them in the ground. Sure not. It takes away the tilson. It takes the sap away. But if they were uprooted and lying in the field, you do want it. Look inside the top Mara folder. In the case of our Mishnah, in the case of Bishuzara, Lizera, right? You don't want them when they are connected, but you do want them. You can't say you don't want them. Elo, you do want them to be uprooted. Actually, you want them to be uprooted, right? What would you do if they're laying in the field? When you will be gathering your tilson to take them to your home or wherever it is that you store your Michael Behema, then you want more Michael Behema. Either there's Michael Behema grade A tilson, you have Michael Behema grade E, doesn't matter. If you're in the business, you're gathering stuff for Michael Behema. So you always want it. That's why Rabbi Yossi can stand that the exception, Mitana Yeshua, was for all types of tilson.
So fenugreek has the same value as grass?
No. Grass is much, with Nacha much cheaper. But they are in the same family. Both. They're in the same family of Michael Behem.
Got it.
Okay. Now, the Gemara, normally in the Bavli.
But fenugreek is a human food, no?
But primarily Michael Behem. That's the way we're going to learn. That's the way the Noisei Kelim say over here. Now, there is another version to this answer that was actually given by Rabbi Yossi himself. For some reason, the way we have it organized, instead of you having one answer and then tweaking the answer, the Gemara has a question against the answer, which will be right now. And prior to the Gemara's response to the question, we're going to go back and we're going to give another little nuance of this answer. So the kasha is meyato matzah kalayim bekedem. The Yerushalmi is taking for granted that we know the following Tosefta, that whenever there is any foreign growth in a vineyard, don't forget, guys, kilei akedem is more chamur than kilei zeroim. You can't even have hana'ah. Any foreign plant that grew in a kilei akedem, the Tosefta says anyone can go in there, uproot it, and keep it. On the premise, the owner doesn't want it, because if it would be in the kedem, it's going to ruin the kedem. But there's a problem now. You, Rabbi Acha b'shem Rabbi Yasha, you're saying that even when a person doesn't want something in the ground, but they might want it when it's uprooted. So if they want it when it's uprooted, so why do we have a Tosefta? That matzah, kalayim, bekedem, the Tosefta says anyone can take it. It should not be that way. Why? You asur mishum gezel. It should be asur. Why is that? Let's use the words of Rabbi Yasha. Shehu roitzu b'hem keilu akurim. You don't want them when they're connected. But if they would be uprooted, you do want them. Okay, so you want to do me a favor and uproot it for me. Thank you, Yasher Koyach. But it doesn't give you the right to steal it. We already gave the answer, guys. I already gave the answer. That a kenim is l'maychol adam and this is l'maychol behem. But before the Gemara gives the answer, it's amazing the way the flow. This is the way we're learning. It says the Gemara, look at Rabbi Yossi himself, lo yomar kein. In other words, the top line in the Amid, Rabbi Acha b'shem Rabbi Yasha, he's fanenfening Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi himself heard this question. And he gave that answer, but he didn't say it exactly the way Rabbi Yasha said it. The one word that he adds is soif. Soif. Ella, look at this. See if you can compare. That Rabbi Yasha says, Roitza hu bahen ki'ilu akurim nachal lefanav. Rabbi Yossi says, Ella sheba soif hu roitza bahem ki'ilu akurim nachal lefanav. In other words, when they are in the ground, this is a nuance, guys, and I'll tell you a big nafkamina. When they are in the ground, does the owner want it or not? One thing is clear, David Halkov.
Yeah.
It ruins the seed. Is the psychology of the landowner then, I want it uprooted, I want it, but just uproot it?
For the sake of uprooting?
No, because it has a value, l'maychel behema. I want it, but just not on the ground. Or Rabbi Yossi said, no, when it's in the ground, since it's damaging the tilson, at that moment, the owner doesn't want it. But once someone went and uprooted it, now the owner wants it.
And you can sell it, right?
Don't say selling it. What's the difference? Big difference. Big difference. When I have a field of tilson, you're my friend, and you see grass growing in it. Are you allowed to destroy the grass? Are you allowed to destroy the grass? According to the version of Rabbi Yossi, let me finish it out. Yes, you are. Because Rabbi Yossi is saying the owner only wants it once it's uprooted. Shabasoy. When it's in the ground, Hitaka doesn't want it. If someone were to come in there and destroy the grass, he did nothing wrong. He did me a favor. In the ground, it's ruining the seeds. But according to Rabbi Yasha's approach, no, you don't have the right to destroy it. The owner, even when it's connected into the ground, he already wants them. Right? So who bahen, because he sees them uprooted. He knows it's going to get uprooted. I'm going to uproot it. The owner's going to uproot it. You want to do it for me? Yasher Koyach. That nuance is the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yasha. Other than that, it's the same answer. Yeah, kid.
Nothing.
Now, look, this is interesting. Now the Gemara, based on the words of Rabbi Yossi with the difference, is asking the same question. Bottom line is, you're telling me there is a metzias where when something is in the ground, the owner doesn't want it in the ground, but he still wants it if it's uprooted. So again, we have a Tosefta that says that anyone who finds a foreign seed, any foreign seed, growing in anyone else's vineyard, they have the right to take it. Why? They have the right to take it. The owner doesn't want it in the ground. But once you uproot it, the owner will want it. The same thing. We're using the same word, Shabasoif. But it's also Shabasoif. So the Gemara answers, Sai Legirsas Rabbi Yosef. Sai the Girsa of Rabbi Yosha. What we're saying now is the way some understand the answer. Like we mentioned, Michael Behema, Michael Behema, Michael Behema, other. Khan, in the case of the Tilson, since the Tilson itself is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily going to be used L'Michael Behema, grass is exclusively used L'Michael Behema, Yesh Loi Imila Hachnes. The grass is in the same category of the fenugreek. So when the person is going to be gathering the Tilson, it's normal for them to gather other items that serve the same purpose. So I want them, it's a schlep. And guys, when you schlep, when it comes to all schlepperai, there comes a point where you say, it's such a big schlep, for so little value, it's not worth it. You don't say that when Michael Behema, people schlep it all together. But Vikan, that's the way we're learning in the Brais and the Tosefta of the Kerem. That tells us the rule that anyone who finds any foreign seed in a Kerem is allowed to uproot it and keep it. The owner doesn't even want it if you were to uproot it and leave it there. Why not? Because when you gather the grapes, you're not going to be bothered with that grass that grew there, with any other foreign seed. Vikan Eloi Mishla Hachnes. Gewaldig. Why not? Because they're not consumed for the same purpose. And we're going to leave it at that. Now,
Nice. Michael Behema always separated? Or do you sometimes take your animal to the field and let them just...
let's not again. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman, Omar, Rav Manaboye, Haga Atzmecham. Think in. Shahoya Sham Sada Achere Shel Tilson Smuchaloi. According to your explanation, what would happen if I own a Kerem? Guys, listen to this. And I own next to the Kerem a Sada of Tilson. Would we say the same thing over there? Which is that if someone finds a foreign seed in my Kerem, maybe they should not be allowed to take it. Why not? Because the only reason you said they are allowed to take it is because the owner won't bother to gather it together with the grapes and a chanami. But if adjacent to the Kerem there is a Tilson field, then the person, when he gathers the Tilson, would want to gather this foreign growth. But no one makes such a differentiation. So this is the question. That's a kash. And nowhere do we find such a chiluk. It's not a checkmate question, because for this you can say loy plug. You can say loy plug. But anyways, that's a point the Gemara brings up in a one-liner, and it leaves it all. Now, the way we are learning the whole time is that really we have a machlokes between Rabbi Yossi, whose opinion we are insisting was not refuted, and Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha that we had in last daf that we began today's Shir Chazara with, that holds that Takonas Yoshua that made an exception to grasses in a Tilson is only b'shazara lo'amid. The Gemara is calling right now Shitas Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, Mileyun the Rabbanan pligin. From the following statement of the Chachamim, we know that they argue with Rabbi Yossi. They don't accept that the exception was made for all cases. How do we know that? What are we talking about? The Omar Rab Zrikon, the base Rabbi Yanai, Kol Hasfachim, guys, the key has to be Asurim. Like we said in our introduction, before we speak about the exception of Tilson, what's the general Tanai? The Tanai is that you can take grass. Grass has very little value. And he made it clear that any other Sfachim, which means something that you did not plant on your own, even if it is L'Michael Behema, if it's better than grass, if it's not grass, it has more value, Gzela. Kol Asfachim Asurim. However, even to that, there are three exceptions. Exception number one is Chutz min ha'olam b'sdei bur. If you have a field that was purposefully left uncultivated by the owner, and by the way, it's normal for owners to want for the lands to remain fallow One of the main reasons, we learned this when we learned about Shemitah, is that the land needs to rest, Pasha. And every now and then you decide, this year we're planting nothing. In other words, the owner who leaves a field fallow has no interest with anything growing there. So then we can be lenient. If in other words, even if the sfiach is from something more valuable than grass, but if the sadeh is a stebur, the owner doesn't want it. Anyone can take it. Exception number 2, we're turning to that Tezvav Amid Beis, to stay near a plowed field. Look inside the top Marafulda, the top Pnei Moshe, that a person who plows. What do you plow a field for, guys? You plow a field because you want to plant a new crop in it. When you plow the field, the last thing you want is a sfiach in there. You don't want it in there. It's getting in the way. You want it empty. You plowed it should be cleared out. Anything is for you is considered doesn't belong. Shmutzik, it doesn't belong there. So therefore, yes, again, anyone can take it. And in the final is stekedem, as we just quoted from the Tosefta, that anything that grows in a stekedem is allowed to be taken because the owner doesn't want for his kedem to become kilei kedem, asur b'hanom. Now, va'amad, here it comes. And now we say that some say that there's a fourth exception. Not everyone, some. What's the fourth exception? Chutz, mistei tilson, shezera'an lizera. Mamish like Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. No, it's in where you planted lizera, since it's detrimental. What's detrimental, guys? Anything is detrimental. The owner wants to take it away. Okay? What are we saying over here? That you're not allowed to take it. You're not allowed to take it. What does that imply? That if you planted it la'amir, you are allowed to take it away. That's mamash Rebbe Baracha. Mamash against Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds that the exception of Yeshua was across the board, but like we just learned, right? Or the way we just explained. Rabbi Yossi holds that even a state tilson shezeron lezera, the owner does not allow for you to take the sfichim away. Why not? He doesn't want them in the ground, but he wants them when they're uprooted. Okay. The point is, there is a machlokes how to apply the exception of the Tanai of Yehoshua. Now, Amar Rabbi Yossi, you couldn't refute me. Now I'm going the other direction. I'm going to bring you a story. Guys, you have to help up with the story. It's short words, so it's gavaldik. We have the same way of thinking we have in the Bible. The way I understand this, just it's much shorter. I'm going to bring you a story. And the story in the Yerushalmi is there was a case, and they brought a Shiloh to Rabbi Yochanan, and he gave a psak din, and he gave an explanation. And from the psak din of Rabbi Yochanan, I will prove that Rabbi Yochanan agrees with me that what? That the exception of Tanai Yeshua by grass in a tilson is always. You can always take it. Even when you planted it for the seed. What's the raya? So let's go to the case. Milsa Rabbi Yochanan Masayili. Maisa be'echon. Maisa. The what? Shalokach yiraka shalginim and agoy. The words literally means he bought vegetables. He bought yiraka shalgina, right? He bought vegetables of a garden. Everyone says befedish, the marafulda. Everyone says no. He bought a vegetable garden that already had vegetables in it. Okay, that's the case over here. And what was the issue? The issue is that Goyim has no restrictions. Even if the Goyim are restricted with harkavas ilonois, right? Like the Rambam says. And they are restricted with, what's the other issue? Crossbreeding animals. They are not restricted in planting a vegetable patch together. They can mix all types of zeroyim, even in the Holy Land. Everyone holds to that. So no sin happened yet. A Jew bought the whole patch with vegetables. And Asa v'shal Rabbi Yochanan. What did he ask Rabbi Yochanan? Whether he's chayav to remove it immediately or not. Let's read the question inside the Marafulda. The Marafulda is 6 lines on the top of the Amid, right? 2 lines in the narrow lines. Yiraka shel ginam min agoy. V'hoyu sham minam harbe. Elo shayisrael leizaran. The Jew did not plant it. He bought it already with a produce in it. And therefore, we are theoretically comparing it to a case where a Jew owns land, there is a mixture of seeds, but you did not plant it, it came by itself. Can I leave it there? Not forever. Leaving it there would mean that everyone would grow bigger. Keep your finger inside the Marafulda. Now we are 11 lines from the top. We're not going to go back to the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan responded, say, you are chayiv to right away uproot it. Ulefi hashuk mechoyer. And the way we're going to learn pshat, and you'll have to sell it according to the current market value, which is a lot less money than it would have been worth had you been allowed to leave it there. The tomato this size is worth $1. When it goes a little bit bigger, it's worth $2. Like chaval. No, there was a reason why he wanted to leave it there. Or the way that Asherilio says that there was no market yet. When there's a market, there's more customers, there's more demand, you can make more money. So look inside the top left.
Sorry, but you're allowed to have Hana from Klein? Give me.
You didn't do Kalayim because the guy planted it. And yes, Kevan, by Kelei Zeroim, even I can have Hana from it.
Right.
The top left Asherilio. In other words, sell it according, you're going to have to sell it, you're going to lose money. You won't make as much money as you wanted. Even though now is not the market time, but like the Samsung Limkar B'Yokin, you won't be able to sell it for more. The Ika Mishum, I'm reading that Ashadil, Mekayim B'Kalayim. It is a problem. Now hold on. When he said that, when Rabbi Yochanan gave that psak, he challenged him b'fanav. In other words, Rabbi told Rabbi Yechu, Rebbe, have a kasha. What's the kasha from our mission? What did it say in our mission? The Mishnah gave three exceptions. Right? We keep on focusing on the exception. Tilson shehelos mini yasav. The other exception was if you have a threshing floor and many vegetables grow out over there, you're not chayiv to remove it right away. And I know we already explained why. But L'chayre, he's saying that, what do you mean? He didn't plant it. Why should he be chayiv to leave it right away? So Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan responded, listen to this. Means that whoever looks at a threshing floor, we don't even know what that means. A threshing floor is only functional as a threshing floor if it's flat, if there's nothing protruding from the ground. Anything growing on a threshing floor ruins the threshing floor. So when you look at the threshing floor, everyone knows that what's there should not be there. Mamish like grass in a tilson. That is where we say you can leave it. Over here, no one that this Jew in the future will never plant Kalayim. Of course he won't. But nothing is indicating that he doesn't want it. The guy wants it. He wants to make more money. How can you compare one to the other? But that's a great answer, right? So that should be the end of the story. The Gemara's Rabbi Yossi's attempted proof against Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha will be from why didn't Rabbi Yochanan give another answer? And that the other answer would only have worked if you don't accept Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So V'si that's the gears that we're going to go. Rabbi Yossi is asking, this is his proof, that why did he not answer, why didn't he give the teretz, kan asur mishum gazel, that the Jew bought vegetables from the non-Jew, right? He wanted to benefit from all of them. He bought the vegetables. He wants them. If anyone were to take it, what will be the din? They're going to be chayiv mishum gezel. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan says, since you want them, if anyone were to take them, they're going to be stealing. That's why you're not allowed to leave them in the field. But the Khan, in the case of the Mishnah, the din is that if you see someone else's threshing floor that has whatever growing from it, mutter mishum gezel. Anyone can take it. You know why anyone can take it? Like we just explained, because on a threshing floor, no one wants to have any stuff growing out of it. It ruins the threshing floor. So, eich at mishiveni daven mishum asa mishum gazel. Im davar shel shum gezel. Rabbi Yochanan could have given that answer, which Rabbi Yossi considers to be a better answer. Gewaldig. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan should have said that in our Mishnah, since the owner allows other people to take it, halacha allows other people to take it. In such a case, the Chachamim do not oblige him to remove it. In Rabbi Yochanan's case, the man who bought the vegetable patch with the vegetables from the guy, no one else is allowed to remove it. And therefore, he is chayiv to remove it. Why didn't he give that answer? You know why he didn't give that answer? What's Rabbi Yossi's chiddush? Is a proof that even in the Mishnah's case, that what? That you planted it for seed, the owner doesn't allow other people to remove it. The owner wants other people to take it off the ground. It's gewaldig. But like we began on the top of Daf Tezvav, whichever girsa, the girsa is Rabbi Yasha, the girsa is Rabbi Yossi, but once it's uprooted, for sure, he wants to keep it, to gather it later. That's why he didn't give that answer. That's all predicated on Shitas Rabbi Yossi, that even where someone planted Lizera, no one can take it. So he couldn't give that answer. So that's a Gavaldik Karaya. Because if Yaakov Bar Acha would be right, that in the case where you planted it Lizera, others would be allowed to take it, this should have been a better answer. To which the Gemara counters, we're going to Daf Tezayin, two Nukudas, which are very important. They're similar, but they're not the same. Number one, when we have a tradition about, there was a question asked to Rabbi Yochanan, he gave up Sagdin. And then Rabbi Bo challenged him. Why? And Rabbi Yochanan explained this Sagdin. How do you know he also didn't say this? Number one, the Gemara says, Kahahida Amar Rav Imi, like Rav Imi said elsewhere, we don't know where the elsewhere is, that Ashirim Hoya B'Tshuvos, that when the Chachamim, don't forget, guys, this is not part of the tshuva to the guy who asked the question. Someone asked the shayla. All they wanted was the way we want. You call up a Rav, you want a yes or no. He says, no, you can't leave. Then they began a discussion. Rabbi Bo told him, why? I disagree with you. And Rabbi Yochanan explained himself. When Rabbi Yochanan began to explain his rationale, there's a wealth of reasons, which means maybe he gave this reason also. You heard one of them. Maybe he gave both. And even if he did not give this one, that's the way we're going to learn. Just because Rabbi Yochanan, who had two answers, and he gave one, does that mean that he could not have given the other? He could have given the other as well. Beautiful. Yeva kahahida amar Rav Nasa. Let's compare this. Yeva means let's compare it to ke'enosh, the isbei treitamim, that there are times that people have two arguments, but the who ma'asim chadmin, and they only give one. You know where we say this very often? I want you to know, not always, very often. Whenever the Chachamim explain to us why they made Gzeira. V'lamashal, on Shabbos, midrabanan, if you have a body of water that's either a river or river-like, that means it has no rim, not a swimming pool generally, but a river, you're not allowed to swim midrabanan. Why? They said because you might build a raft. You think that's the only reason? That's not the only reason. There were many reasons. They only gave you one reason. And that's why generally we have a very important klal, that when we have a gzeira, even when Chazal were megala the time of the gzeira, what happens if the reason goes away? I know there are exceptions, but what's the rule? We don't allow the gzeira to collapse. The Chachamim said that you can't have a chalav, that the Ein Yisrael Re'eyu. If a Jew was not seeing it, you can't, it's called chalav akum. So then people say, the reason is because they might mix. What happens if there is a mirsas? The way some people hold. We don't go with that. Because who says that's the only reason? We don't know what all the reasons are. They only gave you some of the reasons. So either Rabbi Yochanan gave this answer, or Rabbi Yochanan didn't give the answer. So what? He has to give all the answers. He gave another answer. And therefore, we're telling Rabbi Yossi, you cannot prove that Rabbi Yochanan learned the way you learned. So today, bottom line is, not he was refuted, nor does he have an ayah. What do we end up with? Our Mishnah, guys, this is the key. Our Mishnah that says that grass that grows in a tilson field, right? You're not chayiv to be menakishet. L'Rashi, you're not chayiv immediately. L'Ri, you're not mechayiv at all. Our Mishnah for sure is only when you planted the field l'zer. when Yeshua made this general Tanai that you can take grasses from other people's fields. And then he says, ooh, not from a Tilson field. That last statement, not from a Tilson field. What was Yeshua talking about? Here we still remain with the machlokes. According to Rabbi Yaakov Barach and the other Rabbanon, that exception was only when you planted it for Lo Amir, because there it's beneficial. That's why you can't take it. According to Rabbi Yossi, even where there is a kalayim issue, even where there's no kalayim issue, always, even when you don't want it in the ground, Yeshua says you may not take grass from a Tilson field because the owner wants it to be uprooted and to be left there, or Lenusach Rabbi Yossi, right now he doesn't want it. But the moment you uprooted it, now he says leave it there and I want to take it home.
Question, Rabbi?
Yes.
Someone who uproots the grass and cannot take it, does the owner of the land have to pay him for his work? And if not, why? Isn't that gezela?
That's a big question, not for right now. No, if I go into your apartment and I make remodelings and you didn't ask me, so but I upgraded your field, the general rule is you're chayv to pay the lesser amount, either the investment or the benefit.